Wednesday, the 14th of December, 2025. And I'm going to get into several news updates and event updates before I get into a really interesting video, or I think it's going to be interesting. I haven't watched it yet. It's basically regarding energy, different energy sources from more advanced times that were even implemented within different infrastructure, like I've talked about before. But again, this week has been like a whirlwind of events where there's so much information that's getting exposed and more looked into, and so I don't even know where to begin. And so some things I might not cover is the Clintons refusing um, to be anyways to speak regarding Epstein and Bill Clinton's connections and Hillary Clinton's connections to Epstein, or Epstein, however you want to pronounce it, and the fact that he had visited the White House 17 times over the years when Clinton was in office, and forget the guy's name that was speaking on it. Maybe I'll share it, but and he was saying that throughout his entire time working with multiple different presidents, that he didn't even have half that many visits inside the White House. So that was very interesting. Over 27 recorded times that he's traveled with Epstein, and again, these are just things that are on the record, and the We scandal as well. So people are reopening the We Foundation from Canada, Justin Trudeau. I've talked about this for years as well, and I'm just glad because it was closed. I'm glad that it's possibly getting reopened for analysis, because again, there is the very high likelihood of financial crimes, fraud being committed, even with that philanthropic organization. God, I was up like 4 a.m. again. Whenever I do so much like heavy writing, because I'm doing a lot of different assessments and reports this week, and yeah, it just makes my brain friggin' fried a little bit. It's so exhausting, even more than a workout. So I'll get into my Instagram first. These are my dogs from yesterday. I've already shared this, but just the type of people that protesters, paid protesters, are protecting people. Examples just from the area that they were working in for ICE: strong arm sodomy, child prostitution, rape and child fondling, homicide. And then it says, why are they're saying white liberal women, but there's white liberal men as well trying to protect them. But you're right, there are more, fortunately, that are organizations. These are my doggies. We went for another hiking adventure yesterday. We go daily. I'm going to go after this video before the gym. So Smokey likes sliding and rolling around in the snow. It's so cute.
Diva, mi si deve dire.
Ooh, loud. I really like this post. Come on.
Diva, mi
There we go. So Italy's Giorgia Meloni ridiculed those wanting to distance the country from the U.S. following the Trump administration flouting international law in Venezuela and threatening to take control of Greenland, among other what they claim to be egregious threats and actions in recent weeks. And fielding questions from Italian journalists during a 3-hour-long press conference to mark the beginning of the new year in Rome on Friday, Meloni hit back at naive suggestions that national interests could be decoupled from foreign policy and geopolitics. And then she gets into it. You have to tell me what you mean to do. That is, do we need to distance ourselves in the sense that we should leave NATO, close the American bases, break off commercial relations, attack McDonald's? I don't know. What should we do? She quipped. Clearly, of course, I don't agree with everything my partners say. So she's saying all of her partners. With Trump, I agreed on Venezuela. I didn't agree on Greenland. I more agree with him on Greenland. I wish that Canada had more contribution to that element, and that we were protecting and safeguarding and developing infrastructure in our northern coastal areas. Like, I have emails for years saying, offering my employment in places like Alert, Eureka, Northern Yukon, Northwest Territories, et cetera, et cetera. I have emails to multiple different organizations saying that this is needed. Russia's doing it. Other people are doing it. and Canada, like we are, again, we need to be the strongest allies of the U.S. We literally are within the same friggin' continent. We are connected to them, and so again, more economically and environmentally friendly for us to do business with the U.S. as opposed to Russia or China, respectfully speaking, just by virtue of that alone. If people are so worried about the environment, why are we not trying to build better relations with Trump? So this is where Carney, he is one of the people, the bankers that Trump is talking about with net zero, the scam. Like he's exactly, Carney I'm talking about is exactly the types of people that Trump is talking about. And unfortunately, he's our leader. And he should be strengthening our relationship with the U.S., not further dividing it. And this is going to be short term. He can't be, in government for much longer, hopefully, unless he changes the laws and the rules to make it where he can. Again, I don't put anything past anyone. But again, hopefully, this year is the year that there's scandals that are exposed, vote of non-confidence based on his affiliations with so many different corrupted organizations that make us a threat to the U.S., including with the World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, his relations with China that transcend him being the prime minister. People are talking about this. Carney doing work in and around China, business dealings for years, including with his time at Goldman Sachs, and being the financial advisor to Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland since 2020, and even before that. And so he's had his Mr. Burns hands in Canada, like hollowing out our country and destabilizing it from the inside out, and the push for massive immigration, where our systems are being abused, especially in the last 3 to 5 years. Again, anyone that's been watching my channel for years now, I've been talking about this. And at the times where, again, we could have done something about it. And anyways, I'm going to play this out. She makes a lot of sense. And you won't agree with everything. But again, Trump is the one that has the cards. And like even with Canada, I don't know, we need to strengthen our relationship. We need to wake the hell up. And take a look at my LinkedIn. And again, I do reports on this and the dangers of Carney and the platform that he's pushing, how it's not good for Canada. And all the money wasted that should be building our security and defenses, our militaries, giving it to Ukraine, again, where a lot of it's being laundered, a lot of it's going in the black market, et cetera, or the military, pharmaceutical, industrial tech complex, and not to the people that need it, where we need to build our assets. We need to build our drone technologies, our EMP, EMF technologies, all of that stuff, like having more infrastructure, again, in key areas where we can have early warning and detection. We do to moderate degrees, but nowhere near the level that we require. We need more air assets. We need more land assets. We need more sea assets. Absolutely ridiculous. And we're spending billions of dollars again to push, like woke DEI policies, again, spending millions of dollars, billions of dollars on that, but not where it needs to go. And it's crippled our military. And I keep on talking about that, our operational effectiveness and readiness. And anyways, it's stark. And that's why people like Carney are trying to consider having people that work like public works, like public offices, like over 300,000 people, again, train for like a week, and then be some kind of a like a backup, like a reserve force. We already have a reserve force. Look what we're doing to them. Anyway.
Intende fare, cioè dobbiamo prendere distanze nel senso che dobbiamo uscire dalla NATO, dobbiamo chiudere le basi americane, dobbiamo rompere i rapporti commerciali, dobbiamo assaltare i McDonald's, non lo so. Che dobbiamo fare? Che dobbiamo fare? Altrimenti, chiaramente, io certo che non sono d'accordo con tutto quello che dicono i miei partner. Con Trump sono stata d'accordo sul Venezuela, non sono stata d'accordo sulla Groenlandia. Qualsiasi altro nome voi doveste farmi qui, vi dirò una cosa sulla quale sono d'accordo e una cosa sulla quale non sono d'accordo. E se voi chiedeste a tutti i miei partner cosa pensano di quello che dico io, vi diranno che su alcune cose sono d'accordo, su alcune cose non sono d'accordo. Si chiama difendere il proprio interesse nazionale.
Defending one's national interest. It's in Canada's best interest, our national interest, to have a stronger alliance, especially now with the U.S., and regardless of what it takes.
perché gli interessi delle nazioni non si sovrappongono sempre perfettamente.
Yeah.
Questa è la politica estera,
Yep.
questa è la geopolitica, tutto il resto è
The interests of nations do not always overlap.
politica. Mi si
And that
vede
is foreign policy. And you've got people thinking that everyone in the entire world is going to collectively agree to like one world government or a new world order. You are out of your minds. And that's stuff that China's trying to push, by the way. And this is it was even said and quoted by Maduro. I don't know how long ago it was, but in the last couple of years, anyways, and where he was in alignment with that. So again, being regarding the Monroe Doctrine and et cetera, be like a threat to the Western Hemisphere. Which guess what, Canada, we're in that. Anyway, largely what benefits the U.S. benefits Canada.
What is the solution to mass immigration? Is it straight up immigration reform? Do we have to engage in mass deportations first to kind of level out the playing field?
Well, first of all, we need to know who's actually here. If we know who's here, then we can go through the people that are here who can benefit Canada. Help them become immigrants, help them become citizens. But the people that aren't a benefit to Canada, who might have criminal records, criminal pasts, and that do not want to contribute to Canada, then maybe this isn't the right place for them. And then, of course, we've got to control our borders and have the people that come here want to be Canadian citizens and be beneficial to Canada. The other side of my sign says immigration should not outpace resources. Right now we're doing that. We don't have the resources to support the people that we're bringing.
We don't have the law enforcement. We don't have the housing. We don't have the educational systems. We don't have the hospitals. We don't have the fire department capabilities. We just don't have it. And this is where people like Trudeau and the people that were in cabinet from 2015 onward need to be investigated, whatever, and people in jail and people charged and people in the courts.
Bringing into the country.
For thee, not for me.
And they always say in a plane, put the mask on yourself first. If you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else.
What is the solution to mass immigration?
Bingo. And we can't even take care of ourselves right now.
What is the solution?
Just wait.
Mario for the North, if you are not already tracking him or following him, you should. He has a lot of good content out. And he doesn't even need to be doing this. This guy's apparently rich and has multiple businesses, very successful. But he's speaking out because, again, he's someone else that is a concerned citizen that sees the destruction of the country. And he is also an immigrant that came here and thrived and appreciates and values Canada and what it has done for him and his family. And again, I'm born in Canada. We have generations here. My family helped build this country to what it was before 2015. And yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that, but I forget. But I'm grateful that I was born in Canada. That's where I wanted to go with that. I've been all over the world. I've been to third world countries. I wasn't there, with a security team or anything like that. There's a lot of places within the world that people have no idea of just how bad it is. I am so grateful to be from Canada, especially as a woman. And I would have never had the opportunities and the experiences in the life that I had, even though it was hard. Right, a lot of that was based on my own choices. Right, being an infantry officer, becoming incorporated, doing a lot of the work that I've done post-military, which is a lot. And but I wouldn't have had any of these opportunities and the life I've had if I hadn't been born in Canada or a place like the U.S. Right, and so people take that for granted, and they don't know the cost that Canadians have sacrificed. That were willing to sacrifice again for the freedom and the sovereignty and the future of future generations in Canada, and people are just willingly giving that away, and a lot of it has to do with this current government, respectfully speaking. And again, I'm someone that works with the government. I worked in the government. I would do contracts even now. I still have top secret government clearance, and but I'm not going to lie just for money. I'm not going to just stick with what everyone else is saying, again, just to get the contracts, right? And so if people want to have serious conversations with me, people that are within Ottawa and beyond, that are part of the same industry, and are open to having the reality check, then then again, the more people that are informed within the higher level government organizations, the better. And this being able to reach people within cabinet are the ones that are effectively making the bills and the policies and are part of a huge echo chamber that is not based on reality, not based at all on the reality of of Canadian citizens, and they have no idea the impact of what they've been doing and what they plan on doing in the future with their platform. And it's unfortunate.
Shots fired in a Brampton neighborhood.
Bear with me because this is going to get really good. This is the guy here.
We need that. We need money. You have one day, or else if you will not pay, we'll kill your family.
That guy was actually sent that video where criminals fired into his home and they demanded money or else they would basically take out his family. Now, this is where it gets very interesting. I'm going to summarize what one of my favorite creators just exposed. His name is Nitin Chopra. The individual's name is Vikram Sharma, and he got extortion threats. He came in Canada in 2022, bought a house, Hummer, and have an immigration office in downtown Brampton. He also supplies bakery products to big stores such as Walmart, having a bakery warehouse in Oakville. He is a ghost immigration consultant. He's from a town in Punjab, India, and having a big immigration business in India. He came to Canada and was never licensed to work as an immigration consultant in Canada, not RCIC.
Never licensed.
I asked him, "Are you RCIC?" He replied, "Yes." I dug around and found on the CIC website his name never showed up, but Google was showing that he's running an immigration business in Canada. As you can see, he's got offices here in Brampton. And when you flip the card, he also has an office in India. He's not licensed with the RCIC to do this work. When that was found out, he asked me not to release the video, and I just released the part about the extortion issue and not about his business issue, but I exposed his black business. Probably he got the extortion threats because he might have looted millions from students in the name of LMIA. And I have to be clear.
Is it extortion, or is it people trying to get their money back that he scammed from them, lying to them to get him into the country for money for him? And he's not even registered or licensed. This has become so corrupted. We need to get a grip on this. And there needs to, unfortunately, be identifying people who are here. Because again, that already in itself, in the last few years, it's almost impossible to track because it was difficult to track even 10, 11 years ago, like I've said. And then from there, case by case basis, people have to start getting deported, and especially the criminals. Number one, that's where we focus. That's where we start.
These are the allegations that are being made. These are not my opinions, but a message I received that he ran away to India after this expose. And before him, he interviewed to one radio station, FM, and CTV News, and both mentioned him as an immigration and education consultant based in Brampton. He hid and lied to them. Some due diligence was done, and he was caught. So the business seems to have closed in Canada. Now, in this interview, he said he was a huge supporter of the Liberal Party and worked extensively in a former Member of Parliament Minister Kamal Khera's campaign. Allegedly, people are now messaging saying that he used to sell LMIA for $70,000 to $80,000.
Oh my God, what a grifter.
And I believe that is pretty illegal. While extortion is out of control and it does...
So he's screwing over people from his own country in Canada, where he's getting away with it.
Does not excuse gunshots being fired into this home. I believe what is being shown here, a more in-depth truth into what happened in this situation. Just wait.
Shots fired in a Brampton neighborhood.
Bear with me because this is going to get really good.
All right. Yeah.
Just wait.
There was a time about 100 years ago when the United States military knew exactly who the real enemy. There was a time about 100 years ago when the United States military knew exactly who the real enemy was, and it wasn't Russia and it wasn't China. It was Britain. In the 1920s, the U.S. military developed something called War Plan Red, a detailed contingency plan for war with the British Empire, with Canada as Britain's proxy. And right now, Donald Trump is dusting off a modern version of that same plan. Now, if you're watching the mainstream media, they're telling you Trump is recklessly threatening our alliances with his demands about Greenland. And Britain's premier foreign policy outlet, Chatham House, is now saying this about the United States. European leaders will remain concerned about Europe's ability to defend itself with a more unpredictable and even hostile U.S. And Chatham House also reported that in December, Denmark's military intelligence service classified the United States as a security risk for the first time. But here's what they're not telling you. Trump isn't threatening our alliances. He's ending 80 years of British control over American foreign policy. And he's doing it by reviving the strategic clarity that our military once had when they created War Plan Red. But actually, the biggest cartel of all isn't housing, and it isn't even healthcare. It's the one Eisenhower warned us about, the military-industrial complex. President Trump demanded that major defense contractors end their stock buybacks and cap their salaries. He's demanding that they stop being financial institutions and start being industrial ones. And the president has said that this economic message is the one he's going to deliver at Davos in a week and a half. Break the financial parasites so the real economy and real families can grow. Trump's moves on Greenland aren't about territorial expansion. They're about ending NATO as an instrument of imperial control and securing the Western Hemisphere against countries which still operate under monarchies, like Britain, Denmark, and Canada. The War Plan Red framework shows us that the American military leadership once understood who the real enemy was, and Trump is reviving that clarity. And domestically, from Wall Street's housing grab to the Pentagon's stock buybacks, Trump is dismantling the cartels that have turned American citizens into serfs in their own country. There was a time about 100 years ago when the United States military knew exactly who the real enemy was, and it wasn't Russia and it wasn't China. It was Britain. In the 1920s, the U.S. military developed something called War Plan Red, a detailed contingency plan for. There was a time about 100 years ago when.
I'm a former member of the ACLU. I'm a former member of.
This is the same guy, I believe, the commander of ICE. Yeah, Border Patrol commander, sorry. Commander Pat Largica, gives Minnesota State Rep Feist for House a civics lesson on the Second Amendment. And he's the one that said, check yourself to the mayor when he was doing ICE operations. And he said, the mayor said, oh, you're not welcome here.
Of the ACLU of Minnesota Board, and I believe in the First Amendment.
Good. What about the Second Amendment? You believe in that one?
Don't have it.
You don't have just the ones that suit you there, Representative, right? What about that Second Amendment?
Well, I don't know if you heard, but we had a shooting in a school here in Minnesota recently. And
what's that got to do with the Second Amendment?
Well, I think that if we had some common sense gun violence prevention
Who gets
laws.
to say it's common sense? You?
Well, yes, I'm legislator.
Exactly, and I think that's definitely the problem.
Is it? Well, yes. I think the problem is that children are dying.
When you use that violent rhetoric around children, yeah, I'd say that you probably are not exercising a lot of common sense there, Representative.
I'm here as volunteer for the Minnesota Youth in Government. And the point of Minnesota Youth in Government is to encourage children to participate in our civic institutions, to learn about them, to learn how to exercise their constitutional rights.
I do that. I do the same thing. I haven't interfered in anything, but I do the same thing. I take children to shooting ranges, and I teach them to shoot, to exercise their Second Amendment rights that it seems like you want to take away.
I don't have strong opinions about the Second Amendment. I just care about
just the ones you want, right? And just those rights you think you need to care about.
Well,
but not the second. That's always the litmus test for you folks. Always the litmus test.
I just want people to be able to live in peace.
Me too. That Second Amendment does that.
Really? Well, all I've seen here in Minnesota is people dying, including children.
Mm-hmm. What about the lives that are saved by guns?
Yeah.
You don't talk about that, do you?
Does anybody die from fentanyl? I'm just wondering, because the end all is get rid of guns, people don't die. Is fentanyl still killing people in Minnesota? Just wondering. Because it's illegal. Because it's illegal. The government, we don't hand out fentanyl. Is fentanyl killing people in Minnesota? See, this is.
I'm not having fun. This is dumb. What are you talking about? Is this your response?
This is where you need to count to 10.
I'm a former member of the ACLU of Minnesota.
And then she walks away.
I'm a former member.
How to take over.
Oh, this was really interesting.
How to take over a whole.
Again, I'm all over the place with these videos. But again, people have short attention spans anyway. So this is how to take over a country in 3 easy steps. I'm Canadian. Obviously, any Canadians watching this, like you're going to see parallels to what's going on.
Whole country in 3 easy steps. Step 1, ramp up the immigration. 1 million a year, 2 million a year, as much as possible. You're doing this to attract the necessary sponsors from the business and property sector. Because what happens when there's more of something? It's worth less. So the big business sector loves an inflated labor pool. It means they can pay everybody less. And all those immigrants need to live somewhere, increasing the demand for property where supply is limited. So property development firms, big property owners and leases, they can jack up the price of property and increase rents. Suddenly everything's selling for 10 times more than it should be. And whoever's opening the floodgates, these fat cats are going to figure it out and throw a lot of money at them to keep the immigration coming in. You just scored for yourself the richest sponsors in the land. Now you've got superior financial resources, greater advertising and campaigning power. Step 2, find a way to convert all of those immigrants into citizens as quickly as you can. The idea is to make voters out of them, but you want to do this fast, or the existing working class you're replacing might figure out what you're doing and try to hold you accountable. And you really don't want that because you're basically committing treason here. Use bureaucratic loopholes like fast-tracked permanent residency visas or some other bullshit. Just make them into voters and do it quickly. Step 3, advertise yourself as the multicultural option. Make the immigrants feel like you're the party that represents them and you're the only logical choice for them. They all vote for you and voila. Within 2 to 3 years, you just imported a whole new ethnic voting bloc in the millions, which is putting you leagues ahead of the other parties. You just turned the country into a single-party state you can rule with an iron fist. No more of that annoying democracy where you actually had to have a valid idea and argue its merits. Don't worry about that anymore. You can just do whatever you want now. You can censor the internet, throw your political opponents in jail. You just took over a whole country and you did it through immigration and calling people racists. How to take over a whole country in 3 easy steps. Step 1, ramp up the immigration. How to take over a whole country.
General Guillen admits to the bungled operation.
It was too big for the airplane door because the plane was a 707.
The CIA was moving so much cocaine in Venezuela and Colombia that it was too big for the airplane. There was more cocaine being packed into airplanes by the Central Intelligence Agency that the goddamn aircraft couldn't hold it.
The traffickers made a mistake with the plane.
Is it possible that General Guillen was doing this on his own without the knowledge of the CIA?
I would find it very difficult for several reasons to believe that they did not know what was going on.
Of course they did. Of course they did. And the military, too. Again, they're focusing on the CIA, but the military is probably a bigger mover on this than the CIA.
General Guillen admits to the bungled operation.
Iran-Contra.
General Guillen admits to the...
So much. We're going to get to X. I'll share that. So this is what I was talking about, where there's a lot of information coming out that I didn't think would ever come out. So Ottawa thought that the We charity scandal was safely buried, stamped final, and locked away forever. The Supreme Court just reopened it, and now the entire Trudeau-era ethics shell game is on the line. This isn't about one charity or one prime minister. It's about whether Canadians, I don't know what was finished with that, but anyways, sees justice for this. So We charity reopened, and Ottawa is nervous, no doubt.
What happened in Minnesota?
Anything else I want to say about that before I move on to this one? Yeah, the Open Society, Ford, the Rockefeller Foundation. So many different foundations are getting finally looked into. Bill and Melinda Gates absolutely needs to be looked into. And hopefully this is the year where people start getting charged, arrested, fired, held accountable, jail. Yeah, that's it. All right.
What happened in Minnesota?
This is again more
this woman
what
who is now dead.
Renee.
There is a lot of hate online.
What happened in Minnesota?
Come on. Let's see the post.
What happened in...
There we go. Okay, so no, I don't think I need to even set this up. He's going to be fairly straightforward. It's regarding, again, Renee Good. And a protester. He sounds like he's a professional protester. His perspective on this.
In Minnesota, this woman who is now dead, sadly, she leaves a child and a wife, and it shouldn't have happened. I have a right to comment on this more than 99.9% of all of you, so listen to what I'm fucking saying here. Why? Because I am the protester. For 35 years, this is what I've been doing. Thousands of protests, dozens upon dozens of arrests. And the reason I am still here, or I don't have stitches from a fucking billy club, or I don't have marks from a taser, is right here in this image. Every single time that I have been arrested, you will notice my hands I place behind my back, as I am told when I get arrested. I do not resist. I do not spit. I do not curse. I do not struggle. I do not fight or be aggressive towards the authorities who are there to arrest me, because when we protest, we step over a line that is there, and that line happens to be called the fucking law. And thank God in this country, we can step over that line sometimes, but we have to understand that we are now in a different zone, because that cop over there, I think his kids got leukemia. That cop over there, I know, was in a bank robbery last night with the thugs, and he got shot at, and he's back out in the street, but he's all high tension. And that guy over there, that cop, I know his wife is fucking a mailman, so I'm in a high tension area. And these fuckers have guns, batons, and tasers. We have a system in this country, it's called the court of fucking law. And whether I'm wrong or right in the situation, officer, I didn't do anything, but put your hands behind your back. Yes, sir. And I will take that up with the judge and prove my innocence. I do not bring the courtroom right there at that high tension fucking moment. So this woman would still be alive. I don't think she was the kind of woman that would have done what she did, which was resist and be aggressive towards the authorities, as you see in the video, and you go fight about that. But let's get to the base here. The base is the wife is probably looking to sue Trump or the police or the ICE or this or the time. She needs to look at the Democrat, liberal politicians, community activists, and the fucking douchebag, motherfucking self-loathing, divisive cocksuckers in the liberal fucking media that tell her and those like her to resist arrest and be aggressively violent towards any authority.
Let me explain something. Now, I know some...
And even saying, like, to put your body on the line, all this ridiculousness, and getting away with it, and then becoming more emboldened where it's been more violent. And ICE does a really hard job. And a lot of these guys and girls are people that are at former law enforcement in other departments or areas, former military, etc. And again, their jobs are not easy at all, and they are absolutely necessary, especially now because of, again, the illegal immigration and people being emboldened to commit so many different crimes and not get away with it, and destruction of property, taking over precincts. Taking over businesses, local businesses, of people that are already in more vulnerable areas. And it's just wild. And actually, you know what? I'm going to stop sharing because I did pull it up because I am a use of force instructor. And I was for all these security guards for the LCBO for a few years when I was working under contract with 360 Secure. And so I have a little bit more experience in this, but not as much as someone like Chris Mendigma, or Ken Hogart. Like, these guys are in Canada, like, they're like bar none, like the best. I'm not even close to being at their level, but again, I do, and again, I do have skill fade because it's been a few years since I've taught it. So I'd actually have to do the course again, the instructor course, and in order to, again, refresh myself and more training. But so here is what I was teaching for the PowerPoint presentation, and some use of force instructors don't even use a PowerPoint presentation, and but I do, and so again, I'm just going to go to the model, and this is something that to varying degrees is very similar across Canada and the U.S. for the use of force framework that's used for security, for law enforcement, etc. And so I'm just going to go back to the PowerPoint here, but I'll just get into the model itself because we talk about things like tactical communication, verbal, nonverbal. And I get into practical scenarios as well, because it's very important. Yeah, to de-escalate verbal confrontations, etc. Nonverbal behavior. So words being 7 to 10% of the communication process. Paraverbals, things like tone, cadence, volume, make up 33 to 44% of communication. Kinesics, gestures and movements, 40 to 54% of communication. And so when you are responding, where you have like a moment's notice to react, and someone is moving their vehicle towards you, and someone that has been not cooperating at all, then anyways, there's just a lot of other things that people need to look at and consider. So fear and anxiety are universal human emotions. And again, they're being fueled by, respectfully speaking, legacy media, mainstream media, social media, these phones too. Like, even with Instagram, people are canalizing themselves into echo chambers that are reinforcing their own biases and continually reinforcing these biases and constantly getting upset with their phone, or again, like it's fueling that those emotions and keeping people perpetually chronically stuck. Anyways, okay, so defensive actions, tactical positioning, and where, and by the way, and also like people are saying, oh, you shouldn't have been in front of the vehicle. There's maneuvers and convoy operations and crowd control, etc., where there are certain areas of a vehicle that people position themselves in order to provide that 360-degree surveillance and security. And these ICE officers, again, because they were in a sanctuary city, ridiculous, respectfully speaking. Law enforcement, again, way more trained on those tactics, like the crowd control, things like that, than ICE. Again, that's not their jobs, their expertise, but having to do, again, just like so many different tasks where it could have been easily mitigated, if that makes any sense. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. This is not for vehicles, this is for individuals. So I talk about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the criminal code. So I break down very important information that they need to know. Excessive force, we'll talk about that. So everyone who is authorized by law to use force is criminally responsible for any excess thereof according to the nature and quality of the act that constitutes the excess. And so as someone that was a use of force instructor and did train the LCBO security guards, whenever there were use of force reports filed, if there was a consideration for a possible escalation of force, I was the one that had to go to places like Toronto or to the districts or the departments where it happened and look at the footage, whether it be CCTV or things like that, and assess and make my own report up to deem if this was considered to be an excessive use of force or not. And in conjunction with law enforcement, so I wasn't doing this on my own. And the reports that I made did go to detectives within law enforcement agencies, within the areas of the districts that these people were operating within. So, anyways. Okay, so, and I was very serious about that as well, like where, you know, even with strikes and stuff like that, with the baton, and then I just give examples of where people have been detained, and where like what was done, the drills were like caused death, unfortunately, and just ways that to position people where it allows them to be able to breathe, et cetera, et cetera. And so even before the George Floyd incident, where it was a possible overdose, respectfully speaking, someone that was known to the police, huge rap sheet. And again, that's not to diminish, you know, the fact that this guy was, he did die while he was detained, but he was known to take drugs if he was stopped for whatever reason, and to consume them so that they wouldn't be found on his person or on his vehicle. And it's possible that he did that at that time as well. And so as he was being detained and questioned, etc., it wasn't just 9 minutes. Like they were with him for at least 20 to 30 minutes, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong. I did a video on this, but it's been a long time, where I go through the whole footage of all the body cams from different directions, etc. And he was moved around a lot, positioned in different areas, and where the overdose, you know, it takes a little while for the fentanyl to be digested. And if you looked at the autopsy reports, etc., you can see that there was a large quantity of drugs within his system. And again, this is unfortunate, but where was I going with that? Oh yeah, so I give examples even before that happened. For years, I was providing examples of how to position people, like after you handcuff them, et cetera, where to position your knee, blah blah blah, how long, and what to look for. And again, it's obviously case by case dependent, based on the like the health conditions, I would say, overall of the person you're detaining. Okay, so let's see here. Yeah, the charter approach. I give scenarios. Again, my use of force course was actually really fun for people because there was even practical scenarios where you will get exposed to people saying the worst things possible, and you're supposed to do things like block and deflect and stuff like that. I did up their notebooks, and in the front and the back, I gave just things that you could put for the cover. Sorry, for the back, it was the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You know, right to guarantee fundamental rights and freedoms. So section 2, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, and 14, I put in here criminal code using force, section 25, 26, 27, 34, 35. 35, for example, defensive property, 34 being self-defense. Talk about the criminal code arrest powers. Again, so this is how they have it in their notebooks. A lot of people don't do that, so here's a recommendation. Okay, so citizens' powers of arrest, section 494, arrest without warrant by any person. I go into that. And then sections 1A, 2A, Alpha, Bravo, Foxtrot, 3 and 4, trespassing, LLA. The front of it is tactical communication. I think that's a really important piece. And first contact approach, during the first contact, greeting, identifying yourself, reason for intervention, opportunity for response, informing of action and closure. Again, it's situation dependent. Active listening, brief comments that are supportive, appropriate empathetic body language, sincere open and closed questions, paraphrasing and restating, explain and inform, in response to reasonable questioning, repetition of the request and bringing the conversation back to the issue at hand, deflection, in response to comments or questions that have little or nothing to do with the issue at hand, acknowledge the comment or question and bring the discussion back to the focus of the conversation. This is if you're detaining for someone. And for example, for the LCBOs, if it's you are being detained because you were stealing a lot of alcohol, right? There was a certain limit or quota. I didn't agree with that, but it is what it is. I did understand the reasoning. And again, they are the boss. They hired me as the to run the courses and stuff like that. But ultimately at the end of the day, the final decisions were made at the top in Toronto, the head of the security. So that's fair. And and I think it was like $40 or below. It was something like just let them go. That emboldened people though in certain areas, and so there was a lot more thefts, especially like in like the downtown Toronto core. Ottawa was getting more hits and stuff like that. It was becoming more organized. They were losing a lot of money, unfortunately, and and then it was becoming organized. So I even did the private investigator thing where I was outside of different LCBOs and again just data collection, gathering, and just there in response if they did hit the LCBO again, that there was someone there that would be able to provide more information, vehicle, the people, possibly get a license plate, et cetera, maybe follow for a little bit, depending on the situation. Where was I going with all this? Block in response to remarks that suggest inequitable treatment based on race, status, or culture. So that's something that you should not be entertaining. Oh, you're a racist. Oh, you're an asshole. Oh, you're a sexist. Blah, 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 blah. Just ignore that. Because again, it's just whatever. And so it's hard for people to ignore that, right? And so that's why they get exposure during my courses as well. Myself and other people, when we're doing the practical scenarios and portions, we will say things that they may encounter on their job. And they're warned in advance, and we see how they respond to that in real time. Anyways, timed verbal intervention in response to verbal venting, await pauses and breaks to intervene, ensure safe distances. Again, like it's all like treating them like a human being, right? And trying to manage the situation that's already stressful. They did steal, right? And they're detained, but again, it's hard because the cops are so overwhelmed. They were even 5-6 years ago. I can't even imagine what it's like now. Just the guys that talk to me that I still have communication with, they're saying it's too much, and and they're being tied to. They're not able to do their jobs properly. They're being, I don't even know what you would call it. They're being disemboldened, the opposite of emboldened. To arrest people, and give them stricter sentences, etc. Mutually explored options and consequences through the refusal approach. In response to a refusal to comply, solutions should be worked out through a mutual process. Again, that's situation dependent. If someone's coming at you with a knife or a gun, that's different. Confirmation, final attempt to resolve the situation verbally. Is there anything reasonable I can do or say that will resolve this problem? I'd like to think that there is, right? If you're trying to get someone not to steal, for example, or to put the bottle down, or like the product down, try to convince them. And if you can see that it's not going to work, and it's not working, by the way, spoiler alert, then you have to go on to other means. And anyway, so this is the use of force framework. This is the Ontario model. It's very similar to the Canadian model and the American model. So assess the situation, decide on a plan, act on that plan. The assess, reassess process continues throughout the duration of the situation. And so officer presence, you've got communication, you've got soft and hard physical control. Again, it's a big spectrum here. You've got your perception, tactical considerations, situation, again, all throughout. Any type of a situation, your, assess, plan, act, reassess, plan, act. So then you start with cooperative, officer presence, communication, and it's passive resistance. Sorry, then they're cooperative. Sorry, that means that like someone tells you to put your hands behind your back, then you're cooperating. Passive resistance, you don't really want to, but you're not considered, like a threat or anything like that. You're just kind of like moving your hands out of the way. You're moving away. That's passive resistance. When you're refusing and then wanting to leave the scene, that's obviously active resistance. And then you've got assaultive, where people are again, maybe possibly using their vehicles or a knife or a gun or a flag, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got grievous bodily harm or death. So again, this is a spectrum here. And then you've got, there's different ways that officers can handle the situation. So you've got communication. Like I was saying, you've got soft and hard physical control, where you're not using any weapons or a baton or the pepper spray or any of that stuff. And then you've got intermediate weapons, like I just talked about. And then you have, unfortunately, at the very end, but it's lethal force. And it's within the use of force framework or model that these are the different levels that law enforcement and security guards go through, and military. Yeah, so situational factors. So time and distance, seriousness of the situation, possible escape routes, threat cues, physical behaviors displayed by the subject, and or situational factors, including any information which would influence a guard's risk assessment. Again, I'm not going to go through this whole thing, but I like for these courses, like when I do it, I like to be thorough and have practical portions. And so, yeah, even weapons of opportunity, it could be an umbrella, it could be a brush, it could be lipstick. I talk about excited delirium and how that can cause issues with when they're detained with like breathing or heart issues. So the cause is often related to long-term drug use for mental illness. Commonly involved drugs include cocaine, methamphetamine, or certain substituted cathinones, spice, flaca, bath salts. There's so many different ones. Fentanyl. Again, I haven't updated this PowerPoint presentation since probably COVID, honestly, so since 2020. And yeah, so there's a lot I would, not a lot, but there's some things I would update a little bit. So the use of force reporting, this is just, I show them how to file it. The Grape Street Park incident, I discussed that. Different types of restraints. Anyway, universal handcuff key. I like all of these. I have this one on the bottom and this one at the top. Yeah, so when I teach it, I also can teach baton training and handcuff training, because those are different certifications as well. And or authority to carry. I've taught those courses as well. Advanced firearms instruction, driving instruction. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. That just gives people that haven't been in these industries just a little bit more of an idea of what people are being trained on.
What happened in Minnesota? Okay, last word on this about this.
David Cochran. Oh my goodness, this guy needs to be fired already.
Okay, last word on this about this balancing act of values and value that we're kind of seeing on display with the China trip.
I think it's important to keep in mind that the human rights abuses that occur with China do not stop at Chinese borders. China and Russia, according to the NORAD commander, are regularly more actively buzzing our north. China has interfered in Canadian elections. There is more to be considered here than the plight of the Uyghurs, though that is also something that we should be preoccupied with. The reality is that we would not be entertaining this conversation with China if the Prime Minister had actually followed through on his promise to deliver a new economic and security partnership with the United States. Now we're backed into a corner of having friends in China and Qatar because we failed to secure the most important trade relationship that we have.
Right. Well, the U.S. plays a role in that too, though, Kate. Like, let's be fair.
How do we think the U.S. is going to respond to pulling back from Taiwan?
Well,
how do we think that might look to the U.S.?
With Donald Trump, I'm not going to predict anything because I have no idea.
I don't think it'll be viewed favorably.
Okay, last word on this about this balancing act of values and value. Okay, last.
I think I showed people maybe the protest that happened in Toronto. I said I shared it. And I said I'm not going to be involved in this because again I was part of the Freedom Convoy, and yeah, that didn't. So again, I'm probably on lists. But anyways, at least 9 people were arrested during a Canada First protest in Toronto, with it alleged all those taken into custody were counter protesters. So the leftists. Counter protesters blocked the group's march forward towards Yonge and Dundas Square, leading to scuffles. One masked individual allegedly struck a police officer, jail, prompting officers in riot gear to intervene. So far, no serious injuries were reported, and the situation was eventually brought under control. Yeah, so the only people allegedly that got arrested were people that were the counter protesters because they don't want Canada First. Oh, it's just wild.
Thank you for the opportunity to.
This, yeah, I should set this up.
Thank you for the.
So, Christian Manitoban parent raises serious concerns about procedural misconduct and the inclusion of religious and spiritual content in a Manitoba public schools land-based learning program. Parental rights in Manitoba are supposed to be recognized. The school board was reminded of the laws that override and govern them and to follow its own safe and inclusive school policies. A demand for adherence of parental rights, religious freedom, and the law, specifically the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Public Schools Act, and Bill 40. Cultural education is welcome. Religious participation must remain voluntary. True inclusion means accommodating all sincerely held beliefs. And anyways, she goes on from there. It's incredible. And again, this is just showing you, again, how there is so much hypocrisy, especially within academia, where there is no discussion regarding Christianity in a good way, or Christians, because she talked about Catholics, but then she said, okay, like we're going to like include all Christians, which again makes up a large percentage of the Canadian population still. Again, it's getting lower and lower and lower, unfortunately. But again, I do blame, again, the fact that this has been excluded from schools, and then we're including other religions and spiritual beliefs in, and at the expense. And, you know, she articulates it really well, so here she is.
The opportunity to speak tonight. I'm here for 2 reasons. First, to raise serious concerns about procedural misconduct that occurred while I was requesting a religious exemption for my children, Selena and Harrison, from the land-based learning in Ojibwe program. Second, to address the religious and spiritual content embedded in that program, which I believe conflicts with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, the Public Schools Act, and Manitoba's previously passed Bill 40. At the outset, it is important to clarify process. Under Manitoba's Responding to Religious Diversity in Schools policy, religious accommodation requests are not to be adjudicated by the Board of Trustees. They are to be handled at the school level by the administrator, the principal, on a case-by-case basis in response to the needs of the family. In September, I followed that process. The school principal, the recognized administrator under provincial policy, reviewed my request and granted an exemption for my children. That decision was consistent with Manitoba policy and with the law. However, approximately 3 hours later, I was contacted and informed that the exemption had been revoked following discussions at the divisional level. I was told that instead of an exemption, I could simply pick up my children whenever land-based learning was being taught. This response directly contradicts the Public Schools Act, which requires schools to make reasonable accommodations for students whose religious observances conflict with school routines, without penalizing the student or excluding them from education. What should have remained a straightforward school-level accommodation has escalated, first to the superintendent, then to the board, and even to Manitoba Education, before the board itself had been involved. This escalation is not found in any provincial policy, exceeds the authority of the superintendent, falls outside the mandate of the board, and has delayed the accommodation of a protected human right. I am also deeply concerned that a private religious accommodation has been transformed into a public and political matter. Privacy legislation requires that personal religious beliefs be used only for the purpose for which they are collected. A religious exemption should not become an optics management exercise or a politically sensitive issue requiring layers of approval. Turning now to the substance of the program itself. Under the Public Schools Act, Section 84(1), reaffirmed by Bill 40, Manitoba Public Schools must be non-sectarian. Religious instruction, exercises, and indoctrination are prohibited, regardless of the religion involved. Despite this, my children have been subjected to a curriculum content that is explicitly spiritual in nature. The Mamatawasawan framework, which underpins the land-based learning and Ojibwe program, literally translates to a spiritual person or a gifted person with supernatural powers. The framework itself states that learning is spiritually oriented, describing ceremony, vision quests, dreams, and spiritual development as sources of knowledge, and equating the pursuit of knowledge with a spiritual quest. While the program is often described as educational or cultural, the framework relies on is explicitly grounded in a spiritual worldview. It is not religiously neutral. Examples from Mamatawasawan include teaching students that the land itself is a teacher or a relative, incorporating sacred elements such as fire, air, water, and earth, framing learning around the interconnectedness of all beings, and encouraging participation in practices that reflect Indigenous spiritual traditions. These are not scientific or secular concepts. They are religious concepts rooted in Indigenous spiritual belief systems. The absence of Christian language does not make them secular. Manitoba law does not permit any religious worldview, regardless of origin, to be promoted through public education. For Catholic families, and Christians more broadly, these teachings are not neutral. They directly conflict with core beliefs. Belief in one God, distinct from creation, rejection of spiritual syncretism, and the understanding that spiritual and moral formations belong to the family and the church, not the state. Catholic teaching holds that parents are the primary educators of their children in matters of faith and morals. Canon law requires parents to ensure their children's education is in harmony with the faith and to avoid participation in non-Christian religious practices. While we deeply respect Indigenous peoples and their cultures, we cannot participate in or affirm spiritual systems outside the Christian faith. This objection is not to Indigenous history, culture, or heritage. My children may absolutely learn about those academically and respectfully. The objection is solely to participation in religious or spiritual practices. To illustrate the seriousness of my concern, I will briefly reference a few incidents. First, on October 6th, without my knowledge or consent, my children participated in making tobacco pouches in preparation for a land-based learning field trip. A tobacco pouch is not a neutral craft. It is a sacred object used in Indigenous spiritual ceremonies involving prayer, offerings, and communication with the Creator. This is religious activity. Second, my children were required to participate in elk hide scraping. While sometimes described as cultural, within a spiritual land-based framework, this practice is tied to respect for the spirit of the animal. When taught this way, it constitutes religious instruction. Third, in the Ojibwe language component, students are asked spiritual identity questions such as, who is your clan? And what is your spirit name? Clan identity and spirit names are not cultural labels. They are religious constructs. Asking students to identify themselves within another faith's spiritual system directly conflicts with Catholic belief.
I will also say, again, it's a long video, but it's very important, and I don't mean to cut it off, but it just reminded me of Remembrance Day, and I don't want to call out any specific education system, whether it be elementary school, high school, etc. But on Remembrance Day, I did speak at a high school, and before I went on, again, it was a Remembrance Day ceremony, so it wasn't just me speaking. There were students that were speaking and other people as well, and clips shown of veterans and serving members still talking about their careers, etc. But there was also a land acknowledgement that was done, and this and the reminder of this being what they're calling Turtle Island, etc. And it's just like, was it necessary for that to be part of Remembrance Day and the ceremony? And could it have been better articulated by academia and with more of an elaboration on what they're calling colonialism, and people that were here as settlers and explorers and builders, et cetera, and just how much like a demonization is there in academia. I think we need to take a good look at this. And sorry, there's a beeping. I don't know what it's, but anyways. And so all I'm saying about this is just like, it seems that there's like multiple examples all over across Canada and the US and Western countries where there's certain narratives and agendas that are being pushed in schools that, they're not factual. They're not based on facts. And it's at the expense of Canadian culture and the religion that, helped build this place, respectfully speaking, fought wars.
Fourth, a recent project involved constructing miniature teepees and asking students to write the sacred meaning behind each pole. This language clearly crosses from cultural learning into religious symbolism. These examples demonstrate that spiritual participation is not incidental. It is embedded in this program. I must also address the board's own policy commitments. Portage la Prairie School Division's diversity, equity, and inclusion policy affirms respect and diversity for the creation of safe and inclusive learning environments for all students. Inclusion must include religious diversity. When a framework is implemented in that way, in a way that accommodates one worldview, but fails to recognize or accommodate the sincerely held beliefs of other families, inclusion is not being practiced. It is being selectively applied. Finally, I want to note the broader context. Across Canada, concerns are growing about the erosion of religious freedom in public institutions. At the federal level, Bill C9 has sparked significant debate. Our own Member of Parliament for Portage Lisgar has publicly emphasized the importance of protecting religious freedoms. It is troubling that
they want to censor the Bible. Like this was brought up in cabinet, the House of Commons.
At the same time these rights are being publicly defended, a routine religious accommodation for 2 students has become an extended ordeal at a local level. Implementing the Mamatawasawin framework does not correct the injustices of the past by imposing a different spiritual system in the present. Reconciliation is not achieved by replacing one form of religious imposition with another.
Exactly.
2 wrongs do not make a right. True reconciliation respects freedom of conscience and allows families to opt in or opt out of spiritual participation. Because this issue has been ongoing since September, I expect, before year end, a full documented religious exemption for my children, along with an appropriate academic alternative commencing January 5th, consistent with Manitoba law, provincial policy, and the board's own stated commitments to inclusion and respect. I also recommend that this board reconsider the use of this framework as it conflicts with the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, Bill 40, responding to religious diversity in Manitoba schools, the Public Schools Act, and Port of Prairie's own divisional policies. Members of the board, you cannot claim ignorance on this matter, as you have now been informed. Consider this a notice of liability. Thank you for your attention to this matter, as I am considering filing a formal complaint with the Human Rights Commission. Thank you.
So brave and so well spoken, and a lot of good feedback regarding that. And so it just sparked some things in my head right now, because there were conversations that have been happening where in Girl Guides and Boy Scouts, we have, girls that are going in Boy Scouts and boys that are going in Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, whatever you call these organizations. And I will say that I've been saying for years now, leave the kids alone. And I think that, again, whatever anyone wants to do, over the age of 18, 19, 21, depending on where you live, whatever's legally classifies you or qualifies you as an adult. In Quebec, it's 18. That's where I was born and raised. And before that, like, I think that we need to keep these spaces for, like those groups, right? And so for boys, I don't, and again, this is just my own opinion, so if you don't agree with it, whatever, but with Boy Scouts, I don't believe that girls should be in Boy Scouts. I don't believe that boys should be in Girl Guides or Girl Scouts, respectfully speaking. And what you guys do over the age of 18, that's your own business. If you have, where was I going with this? There's other ways that you can educate your children culturally regarding different religions, different spiritual ideologies, etc. There are camps. You can have, family gatherings where, there could be people from different demographics where they, where you guys have like a conversation about it. We have the internet. There's so much information out there. You can pick and choose whatever you want to teach your kids and inform them on, and again, what you want to share. Again, and after the age of 18 or 19 or 21, again, there's so many different avenues that you could go into. And again, so equal opportunity does not mean equal outcome. So if you are a girl that's more of a tomboy and you want to join the army or the military, etc. Anyways, the army or like law enforcement, etc. Do that. Go ahead and do that. As an adult, no one's stopping you from doing this. But even when I was an infantry officer, I was the first female in the history of my regiment. Even my Phase 4 infantry training, it was called the Gentleman's Course. I didn't care. I didn't want to change it. I wanted to have minimal impact on anything, like by virtue of just being there. And again, I didn't want to call attention to myself. So even on my signature blocks, etc., it would just be my rank and my last name. No pronouns. And that was not a thing when I was going through. It was only the last 5 years of my career where people were saying, oh, you need to put your pronouns, or people were recommending it. And then I think it was enforced where like it was mandatory where everyone had to across the Canadian Armed Forces. Ridiculous. And again, doesn't help. And anyways, where was it going with that? But yeah, so like kids, I think they should be allowed to have like places where, parents that bring their kids to these areas, like they can, like they have the trust that they're going to be learning what is expected of them to be learning, and that they're going to be around other boys, right? If they wanted them to be in anything co-ed, there's options for that as well, but different safe spaces for children.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Separated, not different. I don't know if that makes any sense. Again, I only had a few hours sleep last night. Okay, so I want to get into X because again, calling out Carney is nonsense. So where was this? Yeah, Coastal First Nations is an NGO founded by American left-wing billionaires to shut down Canadian oil and gas. You should meet with Indigenous leaders who realize that oil and gas resources provide the biggest opportunities to improve prosperity and well-being for Indigenous Canadians. Yeah. Prime Minister Carney, ahead of his meeting with Coastal First Nations, today is not a day for big announcements. It's a day for dialogue, for listening and working. And so Coastal First Nations, again, so many people are calling this out, is an NGO significantly funded by American environmental groups, not a recognized First Nation or tribal group. And so I hope this goes viral. And that, again, people are respectfully emailing and calling the office. We know about the grift. Okay, so that's about it for that. I don't have to beat a dead horse. Okay, so this is a special committee. Anyway. Special Committee on the Canada People's Republic of China relationship. And so let's see what he has to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Gilmore, for appearing here. In the documents that we received from the government, you expressed concerns in some of those documents about the transfer of Ebola and Hennepin viruses to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Those viruses were actually shipped out in late March of 2019. Why were you concerned about these shipments to the Wuhan Institute of Virology?
So the basis of my concern wasn't the scientist within the NML. The basis of my concern was actually the recipient laboratory. I'd have the privilege over the course of my 5-year term at the NML to co-chair the Global Health Security Action Group Laboratory Network. And that was a G7 plus Mexico network, where all the directors of the different high containment laboratories would come together. For the most part, it was a network of trust and awareness that you needed to have people that you could work with when issues and crises arose. That you had someone at the other end of the phone that you could talk to. And so we met at least twice per year at these different institutes across the world, and so that was a major component of my own awareness of how other laboratories operated. And obviously, this particular laboratory is not within that network. So I had very little awareness of the activities in that particular lab. And so that's where I put the question back to my team to make sure that they went through all of their process, all of their due diligence to actually to ensure a safe transfer.
Now this
wild. Sometimes she gets things wrong. This is Andy Lee. Everyone should probably know that former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien's brother, Michael Chrétien, continued to do research work and file for patents in 2024 with one of the Chinese scientists, Jesus, sorry for using the large name again, Jianguo Q, that disappeared after smuggling deadly viruses from Canada into Wuhan. And even if it wasn't the smuggling of deadly viruses, it was the information regarding them and Canadian DNA. And I'm just going to verify this or attempt to while I'm not going to leave you guys hanging here. All right, I just want to see if there's anything else of importance. There's just so much information internationally that's going on. That's being shared. Okay. I know this is a long one, but this was so good. Moose on the Loose and Jasmine Lane and Mario for the North. These people are providing so much good content for Canada. I really hope that they become billionaires, anyways, or get hired by the government.
We can't change geography. We're not going to change decades and centuries, frankly, of relationships.
We've already got some major developments. Welcome back to Moose on Loose. My name's David. Today, we're going to be talking about Mark Carney's trip to China. But before then, he went to Prince Rupert to talk to First Nations about pipelines. And we already have some major developments here. We also have multiple updates of Donald Trump. This all wrapping in with China. This is turning into a big powder keg. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off, we got some polling data here from David Coletto, Abacus Data. He says, working on some really interesting work here. Public perceptions about the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, and opinion composition of the Conservative Party coalition. And so what we have here is the dark blue is the CPC base. So these are more hardcore CPC followers, conservative followers. You have more just typical conservative followers is this lighter blue. The gray here is the average of all Canadians, and then the purple are leftists. And we have mainstream media in Canada usually tries to report the facts fairly. And only 24% of the CPC base, essentially Poilievre, loyal followers think that the media is honestly reporting the media, which I think is actually kind of shocking it's that high. Clearly, we have CPC base followers who are not on YouTube or maybe not on X or whatever, and they don't realize it. We got 35% of conservatives think the media is honest, and 62% of leftists think the media is honest. Just think of that. 38% of leftists know that the media is not honest, if that tells you anything. Moving on, we've got Canada has gone too far in accommodating different values and cultures. 78% of conservatives thinking it's gone too far. Only 50% of leftists. That tells you a lot too. Half of Canadians, well, actually more than that, 60% of all Canadians think we've gone too far in accommodating other cultures. Protecting individual freedom is more important than protecting equality. 60% conservative, 36% leftist. C-word change is an urgent problem that requires immediate action. 68% of the leftists and 36% of conservatives. Provinces should have more power in the federal government. 62% conservative and 40% leftist. And moving ahead, we've got some updates here from Iran before we jump into all the other stuff. Donald Trump is coming to the aid of the people of Iran. He's canceled all meetings with the Ayatollah and all that. He says Iranian patriots keep protesting, take over your institutions, save the names of the bad people. They will pay a big price. I have canceled all meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless ending of life stops. Help is on the way, President Trump. And with that, we do see help on the way. They're moving over huge bombers that are, this one here is coming from the Qatar Air Force Base. So they're moving a bunch of pieces into position. So watch out, Iran. That's why America just the other day issued warnings to anyone in Iran that's American to get out of there. Now, jumping over to Mark Carney's.
They have been oppressed for many years. And I've shown photos and videos of Iran in the 70s, etc., when they became more quote unquote westernized. Beautiful, beautiful women, beautiful. Like, it was just like such a great time for them. And then they became oppressed. And so I will say that. And so if this is something that the people from within with minimal collateral damage can get the people that are corrupt and criminals and oppressing like a large percentage of the population, if they can get them to step down and be replaced with democratically elected, non-corrupted individuals that believe in the rights and freedoms of everyone, including women, etc., then that would be the best case scenario, where there wouldn't be a requirement for a heavy-handed approach.
Trip. I thought I'd just touch on this
from another country.
First, so Mark Carney is going over to Qatar after he goes to China. We've got this here back from December 9th. So just a month ago, Brookfield signs AI deal with Qatari company QAI to form $20 billion joint venture. Of course, Brookfield was just there and signed a deal. Of course they did. So QAI is a subsidiary of Qatar Investment Authority. That is the investment body of the Qatari government. And just convenient that Mark Carney is going to meet with the Qatari government for the first time in Canadian history, that we have a prime minister sitting down officially with the government of Qatar. I know we haven't talked about the chart here in a little bit. I'm making major upgrades. First off, I got this whole section here. This was actually something about 2 weeks ago. The Reclamaire account on X was digging into this, and people were kind of arguing back and forth about these. These are Brookfield's contracts since the year 2000, and Brookfield has sold a bunch of these companies. We'll get into this in another video. And over here, I have companies that either Brookfield owns or Brookfield's working with, BTS, Oak Tree Capital, et cetera, et cetera. So these all need to be placed in their positions here. Brookfield Wealth Solutions. There's a whole bunch of, Brookfield has 1,900 companies, so I'm missing a bunch of them, obviously. Building out a new section here for AI as well. So stay tuned on this. The chart is growing in size. Now back to the topic at hand here. Look at this from CTV News. China urges Canada to break from U.S. influence as PM Carney visits Beijing. What a title. Unbelievable. The comments here are not too friendly. People are not happy with seeing this compromised bull crap. Careful, Canada. You'll get the Venezuela treatment. This one's getting shared around. Ezra Ravant reshared this one. Page 35 of the Danish intelligence assessment from 2025. China is preparing for military presence in the Arctic. It's a little hard to see here, but you can see China's preparing for military presence, and it's got a whole map here and all that. Trump knows more than we know, but the Danish have it right here on the document. So obviously Donald Trump doesn't want Mark Carney going over to China right now. That's the wrong thing to do. And what is he doing? Well, he's going over to China. But first he went to Prince Rupert. We've got Tim Hodgson here who went with him. I guess Zoom wasn't good enough, so he is showing up in person and talking to coastal First Nations, saying it was an honor to talk to them. Yeah, sure. And here we got Mark Carney after meeting with coastal First Nation chiefs.
It's a big group because it's an important time. It's an important time for our country. It's a decisive moment for Canada, and I'm very focused on
forward. The power is essentially to veto the pipeline
for development. So today's not a day for big announcements. It is a day, as I say, for dialogue, for listening and working. There will be a time for coming back with progress, particularly with respect to conservation.
It's funny. He said today's not a day for big announcements. We do have a big announcement. Today is about dialogue. The man is all talk, no action. We definitely have some action here. Listen to the First Nation chiefs. They were given constitutional powers essentially to veto the pipeline, and they have done exactly that.
So today we heard directly from the Prime Minister that his government will seek our free, prior, and informed consent regarding any proposed projects in our territories, and that we will co-develop a transparent process moving forward. We are looking forward to partnering with the federal government to help facilitate projects in our territories that support sustainable economic development and marine protection. We also made our positions very clear and reiterated those positions around our stance regarding the oil pipeline, and that has not changed. Coastal First Nations, along with Flax Kw'alaams and the Haisla Nation, oppose any project that proposed to bring oil tankers to the North Coast.
There you have it. Coastal First Nations are opposing the pipeline, and Mark Carney gave them veto power. Now let's look at who Coastal First Nations are. They aren't a government organization. They don't have legal land designation. They aren't a reserve. They aren't a band. So who are they? They're a group of opportunists is what they are. They're a political alliance. They're an advocacy organization. They are essentially a group of activists. They don't have land. They don't have a reserve. This is just a group of people that have convinced 9 reserves along the coast there that they would represent them. And we can see the people here, if you look through, what's especially ridiculous, our team. And you can see, so obviously some of these people are First Nations. And then we have this guy, Shakya Sir. He's the climate action facilitator. Sakya Sir, he also goes by Shak, is a settler to Canada with dual roots in India and tiny Middle East nation of Bahrain, with background in mechanical engineering and sustainability, yada, yada, yada. You've got a guy from India representing Coastal First Nations. You can't make this up. This is how dumb this situation is. And on top of that, this group is funded by American billionaires. You have a First Nation political alliance funded by American billionaires that are telling Canadians, we don't get to have a pipeline. That's what's going on in our country right now. This should make every Canadian angry. Right on their own page here, First Nations are investing in over $200 million to develop Great Bear Rainforest Conservation Economy. If you scroll down here, they've got it right here, Tides Canada, the Tides Foundation. There's a guy here, Mike's Money Talks, has got this laid out, misleading reporting by the CBC. Coastal First Nations is not a recognized First Nation band or tribal council under Canadian law. It is an NGO with significant funding, which has come from U.S.-based environmental foundations like Tides. I just showed you right on their own page. Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, David and Lucille Packard Foundation, and you can find a lot of those on here. The Rockefeller Brothers Fund. We also know Rockefeller funds the UN, the 17 Rooms Initiative that John MacArthur, this new deputy minister that Mark Carney just brought in at the end of 2025. He brought this guy in, and you can see right here, I've got it clipped, the Rockefeller Foundation, the UN 17 Rooms Initiative. All these groups are tied together. This is all the same scheme that they're running here. And we've got Pew Charitable Trusts. Here we have the Tides Foundation on Wikipedia. If we scroll down, we can see Open Society Foundations funded by George Soros contributed $25.8 million to Tides between 2020 and 2021, earmarking some of its donations for pro-Palestinian causes. And you can see Rockefellers here contributed $1 million to Tides. These guys are all wrapped up together. I mentioned this multiple times on the channel here. George Soros funding Palestinian protesters. I even have it on the chart here. And I also have Open Society Foundations, as I just read out there. This is George Soros Foundation funding Tides organization. George Soros also has close connections with Chrystia Freeland, who's now working as an agent for Ukraine. And one another thing about Open Society Foundation's George Soros company, if we look on my chart here, I have this connected to Chatham House. What is Chatham House? You can see here Chatham House International Affairs think tank. And looking at the annual report here from a couple years ago, this is from 2023-904, so September 4th. This section down here highlighted in purple, you can see these are partners. Partners provide significant long-term support for the institution activities, aka financial support. And what do we have selected? We've got McKinsey, aka Dominic Barton, Justin Trudeau's former ambassador to China, that Dominic Barton, but we've also got Open Society Foundations, George Soros' company, funds the Chatham House. And in 2022, who was chair, the top guy for Chatham House? We don't have to guess, it's right at the top here. Scroll down, there's page 1, page 2. There he is, Mark Carney. That's right. During 2022, Mark Carney succeeded Sir John Major as chair of our panel of senior advisors. We've got an organization in Open Society Foundations funding the Chatham House, which Mark Carney was chair of. This same organization funding the Tides Foundation funding Coastal First Nations who now have a veto and are blocking a pipeline in Canada. How is this not foreign interference? No, really. It's like Americans are controlling Canada's destiny with this. This is unbelievable. And among this group, we have a guy from India that's trying to represent Coastal First Nations. Okay, just when you thought we were done, we're not done. So let's go back up to the top here. Coastal First Nations' very own website. This should tell you everything you need to know. If we go on our economy, what do we have? Carbon credits. Oh, really? Is that what we have? We even have that on our land, carbon credits. These go to the same website. Carbon credits in 2009, coastal First Nations in the province of BC assigned atmospheric benefit sharing program, creating one of the largest carbon offset projects in existence. Oh, really? It's all coming together why Mark Carney is working with these guys, why he's giving them so much power. The first of its kind in BC and worldwide. Revenue sharing agreement gives First Nations and on the North and Central Coast and Haida Gwaii the ownership and the right to sell carbon offsets in our territories. Why carbon offsets? Because Mark Carney's invested in it. That's why. Our coastal old growth forests store vast amount of carbon dioxide. The trees and soil in the Great Bear Rainforest store more carbon per hectare than any of the world's tropical rainforests, including the Amazon. Well, then why did Mark Carney cut the 2 billion trees program to plant more trees? Checkmate. Seriously. So I believe there's a bigger story here, which I'll get into another day. I have a very strong suspicion about something, but just this alone tells you all we need to know about this organization. And clearly they're wrapped in with Mark Carney. Jumping over this clip. TV's his face. It was a beautiful
conservation fight, on this particular issue. It's not about emissions and GHG for the most part. It's about what it would do to the natural habitat if something were to go wrong. So Lisa, the conversations will continue here, obviously. And I know you made the point about the signals it sends to investors and to capital, and it could be discouraging. So what is the next move? I mean, it was important for the Prime Minister and Minister Hodgson to meet with the people he met with today. What is the next move there if you're the government, industry, Alberta, and you want to try to move this along?
I think it's in the hands of Alberta, quite frankly. You need to be a proponent and you need to have a project and you need to advance it. I think my point, and I'm not deluded, Nathan, you know that.
Sorry, I wasn't calling you deluded. I apologize.
He meant diluted, like the bitumen. I don't know. Anyway, go ahead.
Diluted. My point being, gentlemen, that the reality is that, like I said, we don't necessarily have a project right now, but I also don't believe that we should not discuss the possibility of a project in the future. I don't like absolutisms. You're using the word impossible. You're saying the science will never change. Of course it can change. You can figure out a way to encapsulate it in clathrates if you want to, try to figure out how to get rid of the bitumen so that it's not going to wash up where it is. There's always work that can be done. There can be mitigation done with the types of tankers going up and down. Impossible is not something that we should be considering, because the other side of the ledger is what happens if that becomes the only game in town. What happens if that becomes the most important thing that we could possibly provide to the world, and yet we're all sitting here today saying it's impossible. I don't think everything is impossible, other than David saying something nice about the Conservatives. That could be impossible.
Oh, shots.
All right.
He's calling it out. I love it. Like, he's so biased. It's unbelievable.
He can't say anything. The dude is just frozen. He doesn't know what to say to that. You know, he really wanted to. He could have said something nice right there. He said, "Oh, Pierre probably has a good leader." Like, he could have interrupted. I can't believe she said that. They're all having a laugh about it too.
Than David saying something nice about the Conservatives. That could be.
All right.
What a statement. David Cochrane left dumbfounded. Now, that's one for the history books. That really is. Talking.
Larissa, I'll start with you on this one. And let's just start with the letters as well. And Premier Ford did too, right? There is a difficult balancing act here in kind of, hoping for more market access to China, further
should view China as an adversary. And Russia, Canada, China is great at caught, for example, dumping in car parts, coming up through Mexico, slapping a Made on Mexico sticker and bringing it into Canada. These are all things that China does regularly. And Trump rightly sees China as their adversary. So I find this timing of going to China quite curious at a time where we're in the middle of a negotiation with Trump. We're trying not to, poke the bear. And we can say that we shouldn't placate him or whatnot. But at the end of the day, the Canadian relationship with the United States is always going to be bigger than our trading relationship with any other one state. We can't change geography. We're not going to change decades and centuries, frankly, of relationships. It's not just Ottawa to Washington. It's province to state. It's family to family. It's business to business. It's that F-150 that crosses the border how many times before it's done? that's bigger than Trump, and it's strange that we are poking Trump in the eye and going to China right now.
You can see they're all dumbfounded too. They are all listening very intently to this. It got serious on this panel. The truth bombs here tonight are excellent. Our countries are joined at the hip, so to speak. Even the suggestion we could get along without them is mathematically impossible. It should not be and cannot be considered. We cannot support ourselves by buying Canadian. You cannot just replace a market of 340 million people. That's the truth right there.
Such a great video. Okay, I'm almost done. I did want to share. I have a whiteboard that I had started in it was 2021, and again, it's so messy. Yeah, it's like talking about NASA, and again, this was just for myself at first. I'm like, I might as well just share this with people. I cleaned it up a little bit. Again, my writing is terrible. So then I talk about the involvement, who's involved. I say churches, mosques, temples, political parties, schools, banks, hospitals, NGOs, NASA, actors, actresses, and then I talk about occult ego stuff. And I've broke this all down on videos and Disney, Universal Studios. I talk about the left and right mainstream media as people that are manipulating the narrative, and whether they realize it or not, they're lying to people and pushing propaganda and psychological operations. And I talk about the Freemasons a little bit, but also the other ones as well, the Rosicrucians, so many different. But then I talk about the major three. Where was that? Yeah, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I talk about how they're being played by possible people that are following an inverted religion. I've talked about that as well. People that have inverted the teachings of the Kabbalah. Yeah, I've talked about mud floods, temples, monuments, churches, museums, castles, government buildings, ancient runes. I said they're all ancient possible runes. What else here? Food shortages, NATO. I can't even read my own writing. Erratic responses. Oh yeah, like being more reactionary. I'm saying like each country is just like being very reactionary regarding the response to events that people like myself have been calling out for years in advance that could be easily mitigated and prevented and avoided. And so again, this was like 5 years ago when I wrote this, almost 5 years ago. Talk about that, which people don't want to know about. Possible planned fake alien invasion, real famines, food shortages, and potential power outages, I believe. Anyway, increase in cyber attacks, electrical EMPs. Let me see. Weird shit. Anyway. But, yeah. On to the video. They pulled energy from the air in the 1800s and left the evidence behind. I have not watched this yet, so I'm going to watch it with you, and then I need to walk my dogs and go to the gym and other stuff too. I've already taken them out multiple times today.
When church towers did more than just ring bells, look at any European or American city built before 1900, and you'll notice something peculiar. Church towers, important municipal buildings, industrial structures often have metal rods projecting vertically from their roofs. The conventional explanation offered by tour guides is that they are lightning rods installed after Benjamin Franklin's revolutionary discovery in 1752. But when you carefully examine detailed technical documentation from the period, official patents on file, and contemporary accounts from reputable engineers, a historically more complex and technically richer picture emerges. Many of these imposing structures had a significant additional purpose gradually forgotten as combustion-based electricity generation technologies became progressively dominant throughout the early 20th century. Between approximately 1840 and 1920, there was extensive systematic experimentation with what was technically called atmospheric electricity or ground electricity. This was not fringe pseudoscience or speculative magical thinking. It was serious, methodical engineering with rigorous publications in prestigious scientific journals, meticulously specified patents, and extensively documented functional installations. The basic premise was that a measurable differential of electrical potential exists between the Earth and the upper atmosphere. This vertical gradient is measurable and completely real. Even today, with modern instrumentation, the atmospheric electric field in typical clear weather is approximately 150 volts per meter of vertical altitude. At just 10 meters high, the potential difference is significantly more than 1,000 volts. This field varies substantially with specific weather conditions, precise time of day, particular geographical location, and cyclical solar activity. Competent Victorian engineers were very well aware of this through careful measurements. The crucial question was, could it be practically harnessed? Technical patents from the period show sophisticated and well thought out designs for atmospheric antennas, ground-based collectors, and airborne capacitors. These were not vague or abstract concepts. They were devices with absolutely precise specifications of specific materials, exact dimensions, and installation procedures. Some were physically built and commercially operated for verifiable years. Official municipal records from some European cities explicitly mention atmospheric lighting systems in public buildings. Technical journals from the 1880s and 1890s occasionally report on successful experiments publicly demonstrated. And crucially, for modern research, many physical structures still exist intact today. When you know what to look for specifically, you can identify components of atmospheric systems incorporated directly into preserved historical architecture. Not all lightning rods were just protection. Some were part of lightning capture systems. Certain rod configurations, specific metal roof geometries, the presence of thick copper cables running down to basements don't make sense for simple protection, but make perfect sense for capturing low amperage direct current. Why did this technology disappear from public consciousness? It wasn't a dramatic conspiracy, but a convergence of practical factors. Dynamos and generators powered by steam or water were more reliable and predictable. They produced consistent current independent of weather. They could be scaled for increasing demand. Atmospheric systems were supplementary, not complete replacements. As electrification expanded rapidly in the early 20th century, standardized fuel-based approaches dominated. Knowledge about atmospheric capture became obscure, preserved mainly in patent archives and old technical publication. This guide will examine specific physical evidence that still exists. It will explore how systems worked based on period documentation. It will analyze why they were viable in the context of the 1800s, but did not scale into the modern era. It will distinguish between real, documented atmospheric systems versus unsubstantiated, exaggerated claims. And it will show that the history of electrical technology is richer than the simplified narrative usually presented. We are not talking about unlimited free energy or the suppression of revolutionary discoveries. We are talking about real, limited but functional engineering that served specific purposes before being superseded by more practical alternatives. If you're intrigued by evidence that 19th century engineers experimented with harnessing atmospheric electricity using systems that partially still exist in historical structures, and you want to explore real documentation, not speculation, show your interest by liking this post. Subscribe for investigations based on physical evidence and verifiable historical documentation, not sensationalist theories. Turn on notifications so you don't miss fact-based analyses of forgotten technologies. If you value research that examines patent files, original technical publications, and preserved physical structures, click the Hypar button. Your support allows us to continue bringing you serious investigations into the history of technology. Let's start by examining the first category of evidence: metal towers and unusual configurations that still exist today. The first evidence comes from specific architectural structures built between 1850 and 1910 with peculiar characteristics. Church towers in cities like Leipzig, Vienna, Boston, and Cincinnati have not only a cross or pinnacle at the top, but an elaborate arrangement of metal rods radiating in specific patterns. The standard explanation is lightning protection. But Franklin's configuration for protection requires only a pointed vertical rod connected by a thick conductor to the ground. Why do some towers have multiple rods in complex geometry? Why horizontal rods extending to create a perimeter? Period architectural documents, when available, sometimes mention an atmospheric capture system in addition to protection. A specific example is St. Nicholas Church in Leipzig, built between 1844 and 1847. The tower had an elaborate configuration of copper rods exceeding what was necessary for protection. Archived construction records mention an installation for electrical experiments, partially funded by a local scientific society. The structure remained until 1943. Photographs from before the damage clearly show the arrangement. Vienna City Hall, built 1872-1883, has a roof with a series of metal domes connected by a grid of conductors. Preserved original architectural plans show a system labeled Atmospheric Capture Network for emergency lighting. The system had capacitors in the basement and specific lamp installation. Maintenance records from the 1890s mention the replacement of storage elements and checking the insulation of collectors. Cincinnati Observatory, built in 1873, had not only a telescope, but an extensive installation of overhead cables mounted on poles around the building. Observatory publications from the 1870s, 1880s mention measurements of ground potential and experiments with atmospheric current capture. Photographs show a cable network far more extensive than necessary for protection. Factories also had installations. A textile complex in Manchester, built in 1881, had a metal roof with a peculiar pattern of ribs and domes. Preserved technical drawings show connections to the grounding system and a capacitor bank for atmospheric current stabilization for supplementary lighting. These structures still exist. Towers remain. Metal rods are often still present, although their function is forgotten. When you know the history, you can visit the sites and see physical evidence directly. These are not reconstructions or interpretation. They are original 19th century installations. The configurations make technical sense for collection, not just protection. Multiple rods increase the surface area for collection. Horizontal arrangements create distributed capacitance. Connections to thick cables descending to basements where capacitor banks were located correspond to what was needed for a collection system. Official patents, revealing detailed technical specifications. A second category of evidence comes from patents filed in patent offices in the United States, United Kingdom, France, and Germany between 1860 and 1920. These are not obscure or dubious documents. They are official patents registered with detailed technical drawings, material specifications, and explanations of operation. American Patent Number 119's 825, granted to Nathan Stubblefield in 1871 for apparatus for obtaining electrical motive power, shows a vertical structure with metal plates at different heights, connected through a circuit containing coils and capacitors. The description explains, the object of this invention is to utilize electricity that naturally exists between earth and air for the production of useful current. It specifies materials, zinc and copper plates, specific dimensions, and a minimum installation height of 15 feet. British Patent 2007-54 of 1860, granted to C.F. Varley for improvements in the utilization of atmospheric electricity, describes a system using a long wire raised by a captive balloon connected to grounding through a circuit containing capacitors and transformers. Varley was a respected engineer known for his work in submarine telegraphy. He was not a fringe inventor. French Patent 86291 of 1868, granted to Vian for Système de captation d'électricité terrestre, shows a network of conductors installed on a roof connected to a series of period Leyden-jar capacitors in the basement. The description mentions the system provides sufficient current for emergency lighting during clear nights. German Patent DRP 15,184 of 1881, granted to Moser and Strecker, describes a 20-meter hollow metal tower with a top electrode and deep grounding connected via a switching system that alternates connections to charge multiple capacitors. These patents share common technical characteristics. They specify a raised electrode with the largest possible surface area. They require low resistance grounding using deep stakes or connections to water sources. They include capacitors for storage because atmospheric current is intermittent and of variable voltage. Many include transformers or coils to convert high voltage from low amperage to more usable voltage. It's important to note what patents don't claim. They don't claim unlimited or perpetual power. They don't claim to be able to completely replace other sources. They are modest: supplementary current, emergency lighting, battery charging during favorable conditions. The language is technical and cautious, typical of serious engineering, not fantastic, speculation. Stubblefield's patent mentions current of 0.5 ampere at 50 volts under favorable atmospheric conditions. This is approximately 25 watts. Varley's patent specifies ability to charge a 100-cell battery in 6 hours during clear weather. These modest specifications are consistent with known physics of the atmospheric electric field. With careful engineering, it is possible to capture small amounts of energy. Not enough for modern high-power applications, but it was useful in the context of the 1800s when electrical demands were much lower. Scientific publications confirming measurements and real experiments. Third evidence comes from scientific publications of the period. Journals such as Philosophical Magazine, Proceedings of the Royal Society, Comptes Rendus de l'Académie des Sciences, and Annalen der Physik published articles on atmospheric electricity regularly from 1850 to 1910. These were not fringe publications, but mainstream scientific journals of the highest prestige. Lord Kelvin, in Philosophical Magazine 1860, on atmospheric electricity, describes experiments using a high electrometer to measure atmospheric potential. Kelvin reports systematic measurements showing a vertical gradient of approximately 100 volts per meter in clear weather. The article concludes that a considerable quantity of electricity is available in the upper atmosphere, and methods of collection warrant further investigation. Augustus Waller published in Proceedings of the Royal Society 1882 results of experiments with a permanent atmospheric collector installed on a laboratory roof. Waller measured direct current ranging from practically zero under conditions of high humidity to several microamperes on clear, dry days. It was calculated that a collection area of 100 square meters could provide a current on the order of milliampere hours under optimal conditions. Elster and Geitel in Annalen der Physik 1899 über die Existenz elektrischer Ionen in der atmosphere documents measurements of atmospheric ions and air conductivity. Although the focus was scientific, not applied, data confirm that air contains charge carriers that can be directed by an electric field. The Journal of Franklin Institute 1876 published an article by Mahlon Loomis describing an aerial telegraphy system using elevated kites with wires connected to grounding. Loomis obtained U.S. patent 129-971 in 1872 and conducted public demonstrations. The article documents tests showing galvanometer deflection indicating measurable current between two stations separated by 14 miles. A common characteristic of these publications is scientific sobriety. Authors do not make exaggerated claims. They report measurements with margins of error. They discuss limitations. They acknowledge that the currents obtained are small and intermittent, but they confirm that the phenomenon is real and measurable. The fact that these articles appear in prestigious journals indicates that the scientific community of the period took the topic seriously. Business operating systems documented in verifiable records. Fourth evidence comes from documented commercial systems that operated for verifiable periods. Not just prototypes, but actual installations providing service. Best documented is the system installed at the Brevoort Hotel in New York in 1890. An electrical engineer in March 1895 describes it. 60-foot metal tower on the roof with a network of radial conductors. System connected to a battery bank in the basement via a voltage regulator. During favorable atmospheric conditions, the system provides supplementary current for emergency lighting and battery charging. The article includes a technical diagram. The system operated until the hotel was renovated in 19. The Blue Hill Observatory near Boston installed the system in 1885. Founder Abbot Lawrence Roch kept detailed meteorological and electrical record. Preserved diaries include daily measurements of atmospheric collector current, along with temperature and pressure. Typical entries: March 15th, 1887, clear sky, north wind, collector current 0.8 May at 60 AV, sufficient to maintain instrument battery charge. The system was maintained until the early 1900s. A textile factory in Lyon, France, installed the system in 1888. An 1889 industrial exhibition catalog mentions Duclos' establishment uses ground-based electricity capture for supplementary lighting. The system reduces dependence on a steam generator. The company published a report in 1892 documenting annual savings of approximately 40 francs in fuel. A lighthouse in Cornwall, England, used an atmospheric system as a backup in the 1880s. Trinity House records mention installation of an overhead collector for maintaining emergency batteries in case of generator failure. The system remained until the lighthouse was electrified with a grid connection in 1920. These examples share characteristics. All were supplementary, not primary. They used storage batteries to smooth out variations. They were for low power application. They operated for years, not days. They were eventually replaced, not because they failed, but because conventional electrification became available. The existence of operational systems for years is stronger evidence that the technology was functional, why the technology was viable then, but didn't scale. To understand why atmospheric capture made sense in the 19th century, but not in the modern era, examine specific period conditions. In the 1870s, 1880s, electrification was just beginning. Most buildings lacked electricity. Generation required expensive equipment, such as dynamos powered by steam engines. For an isolated building, installing a complete generator was a substantial investment. In this context, atmospheric systems had advantages. Initial capital was lower. Metal tower, copper conductors, capacitors, storage battery. It did not require continuous fuel. It was quiet and clean. For low-power applications, emergency lighting, scientific instrumentation, a supplementary system was economically sensible. Electrical demands were also lower. Incandescent lamps of the time consumed less than 10 watts. Telegraph equipment operated on milliwatts. Scientific instruments required only voltage. Atmospheric systems supplying tens of watts intermittently were useful. Compare this to the modern era. Electrical demands are orders of magnitude greater. A typical house uses kilowatts continuously. Atmospheric systems supplying milliamperes are irrelevant. Conventional generation has become so cheap that even small photovoltaic systems are more practical than complex atmospheric harvesting. Electrical grids developed rapidly after 19. Once a building could connect to the municipal grid, there was no reason to maintain a complicated local system. Atmospheric harvesting was not technically inferior. It was simply inadequate for the scale of modern demand. An analogy is wind energy. Windmills were standard technology for centuries. They were replaced by steam and electric motors not because they were fraudulent, but because motors were more convenient. Only recently, with megawatt-scale turbines, has wind energy become competitive again. Similarly, atmospheric harvesting was a real technology for a specific niche in a specific era, but it was replaced as technology and demand evolved. Physics of the atmospheric electric field explains. Fundamental limitations. To understand why atmospheric energy capture is limited, examine the underlying physics. Earth and the ionosphere form a giant natural capacitor. Earth is negatively charged. The ionosphere, approximately 50 kilometers away, is positively charged. Between them, there is a downward-pointing electric field with an intensity of approximately 100 to 150 volts per meter in clear weather. This field varies geographically and temporally. It is strongest at polar latitudes. It increases before storms. It decreases during rain, but the order of magnitude is consistent, approximately 100 Vm. The potential difference between the ground and a point 10 meters away is approximately 1,000 volts. This seems promising, but voltage alone is not energy. Energy requires both voltage and current. Available current is determined by atmospheric current density, which is extremely low. Air is a very good insulator. Conductivity is on the order of 10⁻14 Siemens per meter. Current density is approximately 2 picoamperes per square meter. With an electrode of 1 square meter to 10 square meters under 1,000 volts, the theoretical maximum current is about 2 picoamperes, providing 2 nanowatts that are completely useless. To obtain usable current, the collector area must be enormous, or efficiency drastically increased. Practical 19th century systems used various techniques. Multiple conductors increased the area. Sharp tips concentrated the field, facilitating ionization. Maximum elevation increased the potential difference. Low resistance grounding minimized losses. Even with optimization, currents obtained were microamperes to milliamperes, not amperes, with voltages of tens to hundreds of volts. Power outputs were watts to tens of watts, not kilowatts. Fundamental physics limits what is possible. The atmospheric electric field is real, but the energy available per unit area is minuscule compared to modern demands. This is why systems were supplementary, not primary, even in eras of low demand. Distinguishing real engineering from unsubstantiated, exaggerated claim. It is important to distinguish documented atmospheric systems from unsubstantiated, exaggerated claim. There is a difference between modest engineering and fantastic speculation. Real systems have identifiable characteristics. First, they specify modest power outputs, usually watts or tens of watts. Second, they acknowledge intermittency and dependence on atmospheric conditions. Third, they use batteries to smooth out variations. Fourth, they are for specific low-power applications. Fifth, they have verifiable documentation in patents, publications, or registrations. Exaggerated claims have a different pattern. They claim unlimited free energy or power for the entire city. They do not specify power outputs or provide impossible numbers. They ignore atmospheric field physics. They have no verifiable documentation, only anecdotal reports. They frequently invoke conspiracy theories, alleging suppression by energy interests. An example of an exaggerated claim is the myth surrounding Nikola Tesla. Tesla genuinely experimented with wireless transmission and researched atmospheric electricity, but claims that he built a tower that could provide unlimited free energy to the world are unsubstantiated. Tesla's documents show the Wardenclyffe Tower was for telegraphy, not power generation. Tesla's letters discussing difficulties show he had no working solution for unlimited.
I have done a video on it, and where there are reports that even from one of his assistants that did say that it was. And so take a look at that video. I do a bunch of videos again on Tesla, on magnetism, electromagnetism, Ken Wheeler, you name it. And so this is just interesting. Again, this is not my opinion or anything like that. I didn't do this video. I'm just sharing it because it's very interesting.
Limited energy. Another example is Thomas Henry Moray's claim about generators. Moray claimed in the 1920s, 1930s to have a device capturing cosmic radiation. He conducted demonstrations but never revealed the design. He did not obtain a patent. Independent analysis did not replicate the results. It is more likely that the device used a hidden battery or radio receiver, not genuine atmospheric energy. To evaluate a claim, ask questions. Is there a verifiable patent? Publication in a peer-reviewed journal? Technical specifications? Powers consistent with known physics? Evidence of an actual operating system? If the answers are no, the claim is dubious. If yes, it deserves serious examination, even if the technology is not practical for modern application. Physical evidence you can verify in person today. If you are skeptical about the existence of atmospheric systems, physical evidence can be examined directly. Several historical structures preserve components. Start with church towers in major European cities built 1850-1900. Look for configurations of metal rods exceeding simple protection. Multiple rods radiating horizontally. Grids connecting multiple towers. Thick cables descending underground when protection logic requires more direct cable to ground. Visit science museums with collections of 19th century instruments. The Deutsches Museum in Munich, the Science Museum in London, and the Smithsonian in Washington have electrometers, galvanometers, and electrical apparatus. Some have devices labeled as atmospheric collectors. Examine online patent files. Google Patents, ESpaceNet, and the USPTO have searchable databases, including historical ones. Search atmospheric electricity, terrestrial electricity, and aerial collector for 1860-1920. You will find dozens of patents with detailed drawings. Consult digitized historical scientific publication. Google Books, the Internet Archive, and university libraries have 19th century journals. Philosophical magazine volumes from 1860-1900 are online. For in-depth research, visit municipal archives of cities with historic public buildings. Original architectural plans, sometimes preserved, show details of electrical installation. Maintenance records may mention components of atmospheric system. Evidence exists and is accessible. It is not hidden or suppressed. It requires a willingness to search primary sources. When examining original documents and physical structures, it becomes clear that atmospheric capture was a real technology, seriously practiced during a specific period. Lessons on how technologies naturally emerge and disappear. The history of atmospheric sensing offers lessons on the evolution of technology. First, technologies can be functional but still be replaced. Atmospheric systems worked but were replaced not because they were fraudulent, but because alternatives were better. Second, context matters. Technology that makes sense at a key certain time under certain conditions may not make sense in a different text. Third, forgetting does not imply suppression. Most technologies that disappear become obsolete, and knowledge naturally fades. Fourth, evidence persists. Towers still exist. Patents are still filed. Publications are still in libraries. History can be recovered through research. Fifth, distinguishing between genuine modest engineering and exaggerated claims is crucial. Sixth, fringe technologies may contain useful insights. Research on atmospheric physics continues. Understanding electric field propagation is relevant to communications, meteorology, and climate science. History serves as a cautionary tale against two tendencies. One is to dismiss everything historical as primitive. The other is to romanticize old technologies as superior and suppressed. Reality is more nuanced. 19th century engineers were intelligent, working with the knowledge of their time. They created functional solutions to specific problems. These solutions were replaced as technology advanced, not through conspiracy, but through natural progress. Conclusion, based on documentary evidence, not sensationalist speculation. Returning to the central question, did engineers extract energy from the air in the 1800s? Yes, in a limited but absolutely real and documented sense. They built physical systems that captured a small, measurable amount of electricity from the constantly present natural atmospheric electric field. These systems were functional enough to provide useful supplemental current for specific low-power applications. They operated commercially for verifiable years in multiple documented locations. The technology was not elaborate fraud or fringe pseudoscience. It was real, competent engineering with a solid foundation in known physics, extensively documented in official patents, reputable scientific publications, and verifiable commercial installations. Physical evidence persists today in the form of preserved architectural structures, technical documents archived in public repositories, and scientific publications preserved in academic libraries. Anyone with dedicated time and genuine interest can examine primary sources directly. Why has this technology completely disappeared from mainstream public consciousness? Not through dramatic conspiratorial suppression.
People keep getting murdered or suspicious deaths or censored or not taken seriously or pushed aside, funding pushed aside, support pushed aside, etc. for like the woke DEI stuff in academia, the far left radical stuff.
But because it was naturally replaced by technically superior alternatives as electrification expanded rapidly and energy. Demands increased exponentially. Atmospheric systems were economically viable only in a very specific historical context at the end of the 19th century, when electrification was just beginning commercially and energy demands were minimal compared to modern standards. Important lessons emerge. The complete history of technology is significantly richer and more complex than the simplified narratives usually presented. Technologies emerge to meet specific needs, serve practical purposes for periods, and gradually disappear as technological and economic contexts fundamentally change. Physical and documentary evidence allows for the historical recovery of forgotten technological histories through careful archival research. A critical distinction between genuine, modest engineering and fantastic, exaggerated claims is absolutely essential for honest and accurate understanding. If we want to understand the history of electrical technology in a completely comprehensive and academically honest way, we need to recognize both transformative successes and promising dead ends. Atmospheric harvesting was a promising technological dead end that led to valuable scientific insights into atmospheric physics, even if it did not become the dominant technology for large-scale electricity generation. If this investigation, based on documentary and physical evidence about real atmospheric capture systems in the 19th century, has expanded our understanding of the history of electrical technology, please like this video to support fact-based research. Subscribe to continue exploring historical technologies through verifiable documentation, not speculation. Click on the video appearing on the screen for more evidence-based historical engineering investigations. Thank you very much for taking the time to explore real history through primary sources. See you in the next investigation.
Very interesting.
Moscow.
For your mind. Tip jar. I might give them, because I have shared their videos and stuff like that. I donate a lot to different influencers, and I was just able to, this whole time I've been on Rumble, almost 3 years now, maybe more, I don't know, but 4 years? No. I have to check. Yeah, I just connected my Rumble tip jar within the last couple of days. Anyway, and so on that note, I will leave it at that, and I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.